Prime Minister, on pharmacare legislation, how is that going?
Trans kids are 5 times more likely in this country to attempt suicide. What Mr. Poilievre and Ms. Smith are proposing is to take away the rights of parents and their kids to make the right choices for them with their doctors. We don't think government should be doing that. Our government will always stand up for the most vulnerable, including our trans youth. Les jeunes trans ont 5 fois plus de chances d'essayer le suicide dans ce pays. Ce que M. Poilievre et Mme Smith sont en train de proposer, c'est que le gouvernement enlève le droit aux parents et aux jeunes, en consultation avec leurs médecins, de prendre les bonnes décisions pour eux. Notre gouvernement va toujours être là pour défendre les droits des plus vulnérables.
Que pourriez-vous faire pour les défendre, ces droits-là?
On va continuer de s'assurer que les jeunes et les parents ont les choix sur les meilleures choses. On verra bien le projet de loi que Mme Smith mettra de l'avant, mais déjà que M. Poilievre est en train d'appuyer ce genre d'ingérence dans les droits des parents et les droits des enfants, de faire des bons choix pour eux avec la communauté médicale, démontre leur agressivité idéologique.
You met with Jagmeet Singh about pharmacare.
So let me just answer in English on this one, because it really is important. The fact that Premier Smith and Pierre Poilievre want government to take away the option for parents and their vulnerable youth in consultation with their doctors to make the right decisions for them is anchored in ideology and is not about protecting the most vulnerable. Our government will do whatever it takes to protect the most vulnerable.
You met with Jagmeet Singh about pharmacare. He's drawing a line in the sand, he says.
I'm here today representing the NDP caucus and expressing our concern about the dangerous and harmful remarks of the Conservative leader with regard to medical treatment for trans kids. We all know what works for trans kids, and that's supporting and affirming their choices. And the use of puberty blockers is a proven medical treatment which allows them time to accommodate who they are becoming, to consult with their families, to consult with their friends. By denying puberty blockers to trans kids, we put them at risk, higher risk of suicide, higher risk of self-harm, and long-term mental health problems for transgender people.
How do you feel that politicians are making these announcements and not doctors and medical professionals?
Well, I want to emphasize that these are announcements, and I'm hopeful that the reaction from the medical community and from concerned Canadians may back off the Alberta Premier on actually implementing these harmful policies. Clearly, we know, as I said, what works for trans kids is to support and affirm them, and a course of treatment with puberty blockers is part of that successful treatment that allows them to grow and develop into who they really are, and it allows families to have a role in that process, and it allows medical professionals to make the decisions.
If it becomes legislation, what steps should the federal government be taking?
Well, I think that in this case it would regard the Canada Health Act and denying necessary medical treatment under the Canada Health Act. And there are provisions for the federal government to take action when necessary health care is denied to Canadians.
Do you view this as a parental rights issue at all?
Well, I'd like to say, first of all, there's no such thing as parental rights in Canada. There are parental responsibilities. And in Canadian family law, the primary responsibility of parents is to support and affirm their kids. Children have rights in Canada, and these kind of policies restrict the rights that children have in Canada.
So then is this taking away rights from children in your viewpoint?
Absolutely infringing both on the rights of children, but also, as I want to state again, it's dangerous and harmful to transgender kids, not just to implement these policies, but to talk about them in this hateful way, which results in stigmatization and isolation of kids who are just trying to be kids.
Just to go back to what you were saying about the Canada Health Act, are you suggesting that maybe some funds should be withheld?
I'm suggesting the federal government look at the Canada Health Act and see what options it have. Should the Premier of Alberta, and I understand the Premier of New Brunswick said he's also interested in making restrictions on health care. That's not really allowed under the Canada Health Act. I'm not going to say to the Federal Health Minister at this point what specifically he should do, because we don't know specifically what the Alberta government or the New Brunswick government intends to do.
Just to take a step back, I mean, I guess many of those conversations stem from the fact that people are looking at the numbers. There are more and more. There's been a dramatic increase in the number of trans kids, and some people are wondering whether there's a fashion, like a trend or something. What do you respond to those who say maybe we have to put a stop to that trend?
So there has been no increase in the number of trans people in Canadian society. What we have made is a more inclusive society where trans people don't kill themselves. And so what we're seeing is people being able to be who they are. There is no such thing as an increase in the number of trans kids going on in this country.
But StatCan did indicate that, like, for people...
Because of acceptance, people are able to speak about who they are and to live who they are. It doesn't mean there weren't trans people before. It meant they were forced to stay in the closet or they killed themselves.
Do you believe that some of this legislation that we're seeing and policies that we're seeing from provinces put forward are rooted in the belief from these politicians that being trans is a choice?
Well, I think they clearly don't understand medical science when it comes to dealing with transgender kids. And I would say the other thing is that there's clearly a political motivation in picking on one of the most marginalized groups already in our society for political purposes and for political gain. And I think we are seeing that going on.
How will that help parties, in your viewpoint, by picking on, as you say, these children?
Well, there's a certain segment of, in particular, American society, which has prioritized these issues. And I think that, I'm going to be very blunt, the Conservative Party has decided that there's some gain for them at the provincial level with the United Conservatives in Alberta and at the national level in appealing to that far-right constituency.
But why do you think there is an appeal? Isn't that because there is a feeling in society maybe that something bizarre is happening?
Well, I think it's always a factor in society that people look for scapegoats. They look for people to blame for things that make them uncertain. And so in this case, when people feel uncertain about maybe their own gender, about maybe their own sexual orientation, then look to someone to blame for that. And picking on trans kids as the one to blame is particularly odious.
What can the NDP do moving forward?
Well, I'm going to be moving a motion that we tried to move early in the year, calling on leaders at all levels, national level, provincial level, municipal level, and in civic organizations to speak out against the rising tide in hate and violence directed in particular towards trans Canadians.
Is the LGBTQ caucus still meeting, and do you know if the Conservatives are part of that?
They are still meeting, and I believe that one Conservative is a member.
Which Conservative?
Well, you'll have to check with the chair of the caucus. I'm not the chair. I don't keep the records.
But that individual is still showing up to meetings?
We haven't had a meeting in a very long time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do you know how you're going to vote this afternoon for the NDP motion on having avoir une assemblée citoyenne?
As Parliamentary Secretary for the government, I'll probably vote with the government.
Well, it's a free vote. The whip said that it's going to be a free vote, so you can vote as you want to.
I don't think I have really strong feelings about electoral reform. Wish I could tell you more, but I'll probably vote with what the government asked me to do.
Okay.
On the Atlantic storms, there are some people in Cape Breton that still cannot get off their properties due to the
There is.
snow. Why are more resources being sent to them?
Well, there's actually a lot of resources being put in place right now. I know that I was just on the phone with the Coast Guard College. We have a Coast Guard College in Sydney, Nova Scotia that has 200 cadets out there working with shovels to help people. But the amount of snow that's there, it's every single household. His car is buried in snow. Every single household is having a hard time getting through this. And so if you can imagine how many households in the community and whatever the province has requested from us, we've been there in terms of the First Nations communities. Whatever has been requested from the First Nations communities, our government is supporting them with the resources. But the problem is you can't buy a snowblower right now in Cape Breton. You have to go to Halifax or Moncton even to get snow removal equipment because of the intensity of this storm. And so, you know, it's part of what we're getting used to in Cape Breton with the climate change and the climate crises. This is in my 5 years as an MP now, we've had 3 storm of a centuries that people said we've never seen before, whether it's rainfall, whether it's a hurricane, whether it's snowfall. These are unprecedented things that we're dealing with because of these extreme weather events, and you know, this is the future of Canada, but it's hitting coastal communities and it's hitting northern communities harder than most.
Do we know if any of the Parks Canada plow equipment has been deployed?
Yes.
And do we know where they are?
I couldn't tell you where they are in the location, but I was told yesterday that some of the snow removal equipment from Parks Canada would be helping. But even in their parts of Ingonish and Victoria County, they've got massive snowfall amounts too, and so we've taken from one part of Cape Breton and put it to another part of Cape Breton, but realistically, this is a storm that's never been seen. I've talked to elders, and never in their lifetime have they seen snowfalls like this over this many days during that duration. So I'm going to be flying back to Sydney, and hopefully my car is not buried in snow at the airport, and I'll be able to get out somehow. But I'm looking forward to get back to the riding.
Awesome, thank you so much.
I think we'll have to see. I don't know how the vote's going to turn out, but I'm certainly supportive, and I've heard from a good group of my constituents in Whitby that electoral reform, and specifically a citizens' assembly, is something that they feel very passionately about. So I think, again, I don't foresee what the solution might be, because I think it's a complex issue, but I think having a national dialogue on it through a citizens' assembly can be a very positive engagement process for Canadian citizens.
It seems that there are a wide spectrum of views in the Liberal caucus about that. Would you say it is something that the Liberals are divided about, an issue they are?
We have a lot of range of views in our caucus. Something I think I'm very proud of as a Liberal Party is that we tend to be a big tent that is very tolerant of many different views. We often come together on a lot of big things. On this one, there's some differing opinions on it, and I think that's natural. I'm very happy to support this particular motion, and I think my constituents will be very pleased, I'm sure.
The last National Liberal Convention, there was a resolution about having that kind of citizen assembly on reform of electoral system.
Yep.
So do you think it legitimates even more for Liberals to vote in favor of that motion?
Well, that's a good question. I think that's a really good question. I've spoken passionately about this topic, and specifically citizens' assemblies as a tool for engagement, because I believe in citizen engagement. So I spoke to that in the Procedure and House Affairs Committee. I supported the motion on the floor in our convention as well, and I'm supporting today's motion as well. So I think, again, it's a good conversation to be having. It's healthy for citizens to be thinking, how do we enhance our democracy? How do we ensure that we have the best representation possible? Again, I don't have the solution, but I think it's a very positive sign to see that Canadians are engaging in that and that are interested in having that discussion.
Are you concerned about changing the electoral system in a way that it might elect extreme voices?
Well, absolutely, that concerns me, absolutely. But I don't think, because of what a citizens' assembly is, as I understand it, I think there's a lot of work that can be done through that process to eventually achieve consensus on an option that would not, hopefully have any negative consequences. I can't be assured that would be the outcome of it, but I think if it moves forward, which I hope it does, that it results in something that the majority of Canadians could actually get behind, and I think Canadians are very smart and wise. So,
the consensus that wasn't reachable last time when this pledge was abandoned, would it be more reachable through this assembly?
I think one of the challenges in any process like this is to achieve consensus, because it's complex, there's so many options, there's so many factors to consider, positives and negatives of different options, and I think those all have to be considered. A citizens' assembly, I think, is outside of government. It's a process that can happen with a lot of citizen engagement, and I think it will be very challenging for that assembly to achieve consensus on where they want to go. So I think that's the challenge that they'll have to overcome if that process actually moves forward. But again, I think for me it's very clear to support that citizen engagement process, and it's a pretty easy decision for me to make. I'm not conflicted on it at all. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
Can we to you? Sure. Get about pharmacare, your favorite subject, my favorite subject. Your leader today said that the party has put the Prime Minister on notice. On notice about what?
Well, just that I think the Liberal Party's obligations under the Confidence and Supply Agreement, and the fact we did extend the deadline till March 1st, and we expect the Liberals to honor their promises.
Are negotiations still in a place where you're happy with it? Like, do you feel optimistic that you can get a deal before March 1st?
I'm optimistic. I won't be happy till the deal's done.
And what would you describe like the tenor of negotiations?
They're good. I've got a very strong working relationship with Minister Holland. I can tell you that our discussions are very productive. I think we're quite close, actually, on coming to legislation that meets both of our needs. And I'll be talking to Mr. Holland either Friday or early next week. And I'm still optimistic that we can get an agreement.
Okay. All right.
All right. Thank you. Thanks.